Thank you everyone for coming, especially on this cold Sunday evening. As you know, this is Dr. Pratt. She's a naturopathic doctor who also practices homeopathy and specializes, you can say more what you do, in neurology, right? With children, autistic spectrum children. I've been, I guess this is the 5th time we've had a lecture together, and she's worked with my family and my children, and she's doing amazing things. And I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, and I've been searching for for a way to help recover children that are on the spectrum, and I think that's what Dr. Pratt has been working on. I mean, that's what she does. So I just want to welcome her, and she'll tell you more about what she does. All right, thanks for coming.
So I would say that I specialize in autism and metabolic dysfunction, but it goes much further, because in all my studies to learn answers for those epidemics like autism, I learned about so many ways that it helps everyone in their health. So this lecture tonight is really, how many of you came to my lecture in May? Was it? Okay. So this is going to build on that, and I'm going to review like the main topics, which many of you have heard if you've seen other lectures of mine. So any of you who have heard me talk before knows that I'm a huge advocate of balancing blood sugar. I think it's so important, whether you're an adult or you're a child, that everybody get proper protein, whether that's animal protein or vegetable protein in the morning and at lunch, to balance your blood sugar throughout the entire day. So that means having a lot of either fiber or protein at breakfast or at lunch. So maybe you do a smoothie, maybe even have dinner, what you typically have for dinner for breakfast. Sometimes I even say have a piece of chicken and some vegetables for breakfast. I mean, that's a much better way for you neurologically, immunologically, and for your endocrine system and your brain to function for the whole day. That's the best way to start our day, is to have food like that in the morning rather than something just based on carbohydrates. Like, the worst thing you can have is a bagel with butter. That's really not going to hold you for the entire day. So the other thing that I talked about in my last lecture is limiting pesticides, plastic, hormones, and antibiotics. I list this website because they are just an amazing resource for you to go to that website. They give you information on what foods to buy that are highest in pesticide. And it used to be called the Dirty Dozen. Now it's like the Dirty 15 or something. And now they also give you what products don't buy organic, because it doesn't make any difference. Like broccoli is one of those that you don't need to buy broccoli organic because they don't put pesticides on broccoli. So they have these lists. They also have, you can look up any skin product and find out, the amount of pesticides, the amount of hormones, the amount of chemicals in there that could be carcinogenic. So it's an incredible resource for you. And then the other piece of information that I don't know of any other website that does this for you is if you type in your zip code, they'll tell you who's polluting in your area and what they're polluting, so that you know exactly what's in your air, your water, and your environment that's affecting your health. So you can go to ewg.org, and that will give you that information. Okay, so these are the basic treatment guidelines for really helping you get the most from your food. Chew your food when you eat, because when you chew your food, you mix it with your saliva, which that's where carbohydrate breaks down, is actually in your mouth. And if you don't chew your food, then over time, your pancreas has to do all the work, and it can only do that for so long before it kind of gives up, and then your digestion gets really bad. So what happens is, you don't chew your food, your stomach, it goes into your stomach, the acid doesn't really get very, if you're not very acidic either, you get it going into the into the duodenum, and the pancreas doesn't excrete its produce its enzymes, and then you're just not digesting in your food, and the bacteria grows off of that and creates all kinds of gas, or it doesn't break down your food correctly, and then the organisms that grow in your GI change. So it all starts with chewing. So chew your food really well. Don't drink anything with your meals, because when you drink something with your meals, you dilute your stomach acid, and you don't want to do that either, because again, you need your stomach to be acidic to hit the duodenum for the pancreatic enzymes to release and your bile secretion to break down fats. So I talked about that in my last lecture, and if you need to know more about that, we can talk about it later. But so don't drink anything with your meals. You want to avoid all your food sensitivities if you know what they are. Some of us don't know what they are, so an anti-inflammatory diet can be helpful, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Eating dark leafy greens every day, like kale or chard or watercress, are really wonderful for your liver. So we're going to talk more about that later too, but it's in my basics that you really want to get those. You don't want to eat a lot of those raw, because it can affect your thyroid over time, so you really should steam them. You want to drink half of your body weight in ounces of water. That's a lot of water. Most people don't drink that much water. You want to take extra magnesium, and then there's castor oil packs that you can do that really help you, again, detox your liver, and it helps your GI with inflammation. It's external. It's not internal castor oil like they used to do in the 40s and 50s as punishment for children. But castor oil packs they're wonderful. I say I'd swim in castor oil if I could every day, because it's so beneficial for your health if you absorb it through your skin. If you take it internally, it's a cathartic, and it'll just make you in the bath. It'll put you in the bathroom all day. So we'll go on to the next slide. So how many people in here have heard of epigenetics? Good. So that's a lot of what I'm going to cover tonight, just because it's a big topic, and not a lot of people know much about it, and there's a lot of confusion about it, and there's a lot of people that think that they know how to use epigenetics, and it's just emerging in popular culture right now. So how does your environment impact your genes? You're going to understand this a little bit better, but this guy has been eating butter pecan, and he's like really gained a lot of weight and feels terrible, and I'm going to explain why that is. It's not just because he's eating butter pecan, but it's probably because his genes don't support that. So we'll go to the next slide. So any of you heard of Bruce Lipton's work? So he is a geneticist, and he basically has proven that we no longer are just slaves to our genes. So we used to think, and what I learned in medical school was, if your parents had family history of something, then you were probably going to get the same thing, right? Because it's genetic, it's hardwired, it's not going to change. But what he proved is that it is environmentally induced. So your environment turns on and off your genes. And so with that, we've been thinking that in natural medicine for a very long time. That's the reason why if you eat a healthier diet and you exercise and you drink a lot of water, your health can be very different from your twin that maybe eats butter pecan ice cream and smokes 2 packs of cigarettes a day and never exercises, right? You're going to have 2 different bodies based on the environment. So, nutrigenomics is nutrition to change your gene expression. I list a few things here. Probiotics are really important because the whole ecosystem of your GI is the interface of your immune system, your nervous system, your endocrine system. So taking good care of your GI is one of the cornerstones of changing how you express your genes. So, taking the right probiotics and having the right ecosystem in your GI and lowering inflammation is going to make a huge difference. Eating high sulfur foods like egg and cauliflower and broccoli and artichokes and onion and garlic, they all really help you be less inflamed. They also help you have a lot of antioxidants to fight pathogens in the body, and they keep you younger for longer. They help your telomeres, which are the parts of your genes, stay young, so you look younger for longer. One side note is, who in here has a child or has asthma? Yeah. So Denise, you should know that kids that have asthma or have a real sensitivity to high sulfur foods And if you give them something called molybdenum, it helps them tolerate these foods, which are going to help them in the long run, but they don't have the molybdenum to really metabolize what they need from their food. So they've actually found that if you give a child a bunch of these foods that the child has asthma, and you give them all these foods in one day, they may have an asthma attack. But if you give them molybdenum, they won't, and they'll actually be fine. So you just have to know that high sulfur foods can be dangerous with kids with asthma, unless you know how to manage it with molybdenum. But you don't want to avoid those foods either, because they're so healthful, right? So it's a balance. So a big part of this, a big piece, so I said before, it's GI health and oxidative stress. And oxidative stress can be smoke. Let's say you're around somebody who's smoking. That's oxidative stress that's coming, you're breathing it in, right? All of the different heavy metals and things that are in our water cause oxidative stress. The pollutants in the air cause oxidative stress. Many of the chemical reactions in our own body create oxidative stress. So it's finding out ways to lower your oxidative stress. So we talked about all those different things that you could find on the Environmental Working Group's website. That's a great place to start, like clean up your diet and use organic foods whenever you can. Drink really clean water if you can. A big one is reducing physiological stress. So learning how to manage your stress can make a huge difference in your health, because the more stressed you are, the more inflamed you are, and the more oxidative stress attacks your mitochondria. And we're going to talk about what your mitochondria is in a minute. But it really, really makes a huge difference if we can manage those factors that are constantly coming in. And then always, how we deal with oxidative stress is often through the liver. And so I'm going to talk about different foods and things, again, like artichokes, dark leafy greens, turmeric, and there's herbs like milk thistle that help you to break down these toxins and get them out of your body, and also break down these reactive oxygen species that cause oxidative stress and get those out of your body. So we'll go to the next slide. So if you look at this graph, it can look a little overwhelming at first, but it's basically showing you all the different factors that affect your genes. So your diet is a big factor, toxins and drugs, which sometimes your diet has those in them. So it's knowing which foods have toxins in them, right? Fried foods are really not good for you. Foods like high carbohydrate foods can be problematic for some people, and if they have a lot of hormones and drugs in them, like say farmed fish, those are really toxic. So it can not only be in just toxins and drugs that you take internally, but it could also be something in your diet. Anything that is inflammatory, which there's so many things that are inflammatory on a constant basis that we are fighting that always. Hypoxia means that a lack of oxygen. So if we're anemic, your brain doesn't get oxygen. Does everybody know that? So it's really important, whether you're a child or an adult, to find out if you have enough iron, because if you don't have enough iron, you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain, and you're hypoxic or lacking oxygen. So another one is, what was the mother's health like before she had you, and while she carried you, and then right after birth? That's a real big piece that affects your genes later on. Aging, as we get older, we have to keep up with things a little bit more than we did when we were 20 or 10. And then radiation and chemicals that are in our environment that are bombarding us all the time. So they change our gene expression, and then basically we have health problems that result from that. So a lot of times your lifestyle, your diet, your compliance to staying on the right track with whatever we come up with is really important. We want you to be motivated. We want you to have a good mindset. We want you to clean up your environment, drink water, and exercise. Like, these are all things that everybody knows, right? I haven't gotten to anything that's all pretty much information you already know, right? Okay, so we'll go to the next one. So this is this is a child and they're drinking a green smoothie. How many people in here give their children green smoothies? Yeah, they're really pretty good for you. You don't want to give them, and it's better to give it in its raw form a couple times a week. I wouldn't give it every day, and the reason why is, again, you don't want to reduce their thyroid hormones, so you really don't want to give kale and chard every day. But you could give, one of my smoothie recipes is parsley, lemon, a green apple, do I put it, and chia seeds. And that makes it kind of like a lemonade. It's like a lemonade with parsley. It's a parsley lemonade. And most kids like it. It's just green. You know, you may put it in a pink cup if they don't like the color of it. But they're getting excellent folic acid in here. They're getting all kinds of anti-inflammatory phytonutrients. They're getting the ability to fight infection. So there's so many benefits to giving them this kind of nutrition on a regular basis. So, okay. So who's in here has heard of the GAPS diet? Yeah. So the GAPS diet helps a lot of people. Now, I want everybody to tell me why your children are on the GAPS diet. Like, just tell me why that you were told to put your child on the GAPS diet.
GI health.
GI health.
Irritated tummy, like soothe an irritated tummy.
Yep. Yep, because it reestablishes all the good fats that are in those bone broths, help, well, there's cytokines and natural killer cells, and it really helps the immune system regulate, and it helps the mucosal level of the GI heal. So that's one reason. Yep. Anybody else? Another reason why they were put on it? It can help with behavior issues. It can help with like skin problems and immune reactions. So there's a website that you can go to about GAPS, but I'm a huge believer in bone broths because it has really high glycine in it, and glycine really helps you make glutathione, which glutathione is the main antioxidant in your liver, in your body, that breaks down oxidative stress. So that's another thing that's in these broths. And so at the end, I have a recipe on how to make it, if that works for you. You probably all have seen one or another because it's been around for hundreds of years, but I have one at the end of this lecture. So it really eliminates a lot of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates in general are going to be pro-inflammatory. So you don't, like I said, you don't really want to eat a lot of just simple carbohydrates, but you can have higher fiber carbohydrates. Like, do they still make manna bread? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. Manna bread is an excellent way. It's really high in fiber. It's got all kinds of vegetables in it too, along with the sprouted wheat. Some of the other sprouted grains, again, it activates their nutrients, so they're more bioavailable to you, like the sprouted Ezekiel breads and things like that. If you're not going gluten-free, that's all fine. On the GAPS diet, they'd take all of it out, though. They wouldn't let you have any grains. It's kind of pre-paleo. that really, and what it's focusing is on fats, and getting your nervous system also regulated for that. So it also has a lot of fermented foods. Again, it's trying to repopulate the right bacteria in your GI. So fermented foods are really helpful. So kimchi would be a fermented food, sauerkraut. You can pickle your own. I have a slide in here with a website on it where you can start pickling your own at home. You can just cut up your own vegetables and throw them in a mason jar and pickle them and ferment them yourself. And it provides, again, all that wonderful, the wonderful nutrients of whatever you decide, whether it's green beans or sauerkraut or what you want to put in there. But you'll get the probiotics along with it. You can take probiotics separately. That's part of the GAPS program. You can take L-glutamine to give you more support to heal that mucosal lining. And what all of this does is it brings down so many, when you heal the digestive system or the GI tract, you are going to give somebody, they're going to regulate in their moods. They're going to have an easier time with digestion, so their ability to tolerate more foods. If they're somebody that are really sensitive to a lot of different foods, it starts to heal it so that eventually you can add more foods back in once you fix that leaky gut. And their immune system is more robust, so they can fight an infection. So people that are sick all the time, if they start to even do a modified GAPS where all they're doing is a lot of bone broths, that will make a huge difference in their health. And the easiest way to do that is just to get a slow cooker. They're so easy. You just throw the bones in and like some vegetables and walk away and fill it with water, and 24 hours later you have a really nutritional bone broth. So fish oil and krill oil are also really important in the GAPS diet. Again, it's getting those good fats in so that you can repair your intestinal lining and your cellular walls, because your cells are made up of a bilipid barrier, and when you don't have the right essential fatty acids, they become really stiff or they get too loose. So that's the reason why we want fish or krill oil in there. So this is my anti-inflammatory diet. I have a handout on this in my office. If you want a copy of this, you can give Diane a call. And it's eliminating certain foods. These are the top foods that are problematic usually: sugar, gluten, dairy, corn, soy, beef, peanuts, banana, caffeine, and pork. And if you take all of those out, I say for 9 weeks, then you can add each one back in and see how did your body tolerate it. So I have this great story. I remember it was 8 years ago when I was in the city, and I used to be in Chelsea in Manhattan. And this woman brought her son to see me, and I had said that I wanted him on this anti-inflammatory diet because he had a lot of neurological issues and immune issues that I felt like it would really work for him. And she said, well, I think the whole family should go on this program. I don't want him to feel like he's, just like the only one with this burden. We're all going to do it together. And so they all did it together. And I said before, do you have any health issues? No, we're all so healthy. We're all fine, right? And so then she went on the anti-inflammatory diet, and she reported back to me 3 months later and said, we feel fantastic. We had no idea how bad we felt. So it's just this constant malaise that sometimes we have when we have a food sensitivity that we just are eating. We have no idea, right? We've just learned to tolerate feeling that way. And once we take it out and heal, when we put it back in, we notice a big change. So on my sheet, it shows how to reintroduce those foods. And so it can show up in so many different ways. It could show up as a sinus infection or an earache, or it could show up as a cough. It could show up as a rash. It could show up as a mood change. There was one child that I saw that he didn't think dairy made any difference in his life, right? And so then they took it out, and he was just scratching and itching to put it back in. And so 9 weeks later, we put it back into his diet, and he said he didn't notice his change, but his parents noticed him bouncing off the walls, and his mood was completely different. So it can not just be a physical manifestation of a reaction, but it can also be a psychological or a mood. So otherwise, if you are impatient, which there are some people that just don't even want to mess with this because their child is already so picky, you can run something called a Cyrex test, which shows an immune reaction. So there's a lot of different food sensitivity testing. Depending on what kind of food sensitivity we're looking at and what the issues are at hand, I run different tests based on those. But if you're looking for pro-inflammatory, sometimes I run a LEAP. But if you're looking for an IgG or an IgE or an IgA-mediated response, which is an immune response rather than just an inflammatory response, a Cyrex is a little bit more helpful. You want to do the next one? Okay, so this is a mitochondria. Does anybody remember what a mitochondria does? It's in every one of your cells. It produces energy. Absolutely right. It produces something called ATP. And ATP is what makes all the cells run in your body. And what damages ATP or the mitochondria the most? Oxidative stress and inflammation. right? Those two come up and they shut down. And so if like, let's say you notice that you're really sluggish in your thinking, or you're really tired all the time, or you just have, you become apathetic, like children that become kind of like apathetic, they don't really care, they don't work very hard. Sometimes it's actually they have oxidative stress or inflammation, or there's something nutrient-wise, they're not getting enough of their mitochondria fed and they don't have enough energy. So it's really important to know whether or not you're producing enough energy or not. I can't tell you how many kids are low tone, right, or slow in school, or can't stay with something for focusing. And when we get in there and start really giving them maybe CoQ10 or L-carnitine or vitamin E or creatine, all of a sudden they perk up because their brain has energy again. So, and it can happen as we age too. As we age, we collect and have more inflammation and more oxidative stress, and as we have more and more of that, it actually shuts down our mitochondria or kills our mitochondria. So it's, again, it goes back, it harkens back to eat a really healthy diet of vegetables, good lean proteins, and stay away from fried foods or processed foods to help your body to maintain itself and have more energy and have more nutrients. So what else? And also reducing your environmental toxicity, which we could do another lecture on environmental toxicity at some point if we had to. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. So there's things that don't require you to take extra supplements. Just getting deeper breaths, just breathing deeper is going to help your mitochondria, because the more oxygen you have and the more you reduce your cortisol, the better your mitochondria is going to function. So belly breathing, take deep breaths. Some people I tell actually to set an alarm every hour on their phone to take 10 deep breaths. And it reprograms their nervous system. So some people that are so agitated and can't sleep at night, I tell them, take 10 deep breaths every hour, and that actually turns out to helping them sleep at night because they're going more into their parasympathetic rather than staying in that sympathetic overdrive, because you've got that too much cortisol going or too much norepinephrine that's keeping you going. Yeah.
Is that like the difference between breathing through your nose and your mouth?
Right, so if you close your mouth, you're going to have a lot more parasympathetic. It just calms you down. But the mouth breathers out there, but I have to say, a lot of times the mouth breathers actually have a food sensitivity that's causing their turbinates to get swollen and inflamed, and then they have to breathe through their mouth because they can't breathe through their nose. So if you identify the food sensitivity and stop the snoring at night and the mouth breathing all day, all of a sudden they'll close their mouth and they also calm. Yeah, it makes a big difference, yeah, how you breathe. So best if you breathe through your nose with your mouth closed. So increasing electrons would be through raw plant and algae foods. There's spirulina and things like that that you can buy. There's chlorella that you can buy. Drinking really healthy water. Has everyone heard of earthing? So can you imagine how many different forms of radiation that are hitting us right now, whether it's through what's being plugged in and the computers going, but all the Wi-Fi that goes through us all the time? Well, there's a whole theory of thought that we actually need to get on the earth, get down on the dirt to ground ourselves. And so it's got a lot of steam behind it, in that it's the strongest antioxidant that you can give yourself is actually to get your skin in the dirt, just laying on your grass in your yard. So when somebody says, somebody calls me and says, I have a couple patients that are electrically sensitive. So if their Wi-Fi is going in their house, after a couple days or even one day, they'll start to feel nervous and agitated, and they don't know why. And if they go out and lay on the ground, I've actually said it, you need to go outside and lay on the ground. And they feel so much better. Within about 5 minutes, they feel a lot better. So it's something that you can do on a regular basis. Just go out in your backyard. Hopefully you won't get a tick, because nobody wants Lyme around here. So find Find a place that maybe you won't get a tick. But there is earthing, you know, if you come west, you can get in the desert. There's no ticks there. But getting your body on the earth, getting your feet on the earth. Speaking of Michael Fronte, he's coming to Boulder to sing at an event for an autism group. And he doesn't ever wear shoes. He's constantly earthing himself wherever he goes. I saw him at Red Rocks and he was running around without any shoes on. Apparently he never puts shoes on even when he goes to like Africa and places. And then the ocean, what you have here is you have the ocean, right? So sitting by the ocean, all those negative ions, that also really helps your mitochondria. It helps with oxidative stress. Just sitting by the ocean, listening to the tide come in is so helpful for you. Yes, eating less is actually a little bit better for your mitochondria. I'd say eating the right things, right? Eating more of those fresh vegetables, you know, quinoa and maybe a little bit of protein. That would be really good for you, but not eating massive amounts. Yeah, again, no more fried foods if you're going to try to help your mitochondria. Or alcohol. One glass of red wine is different than like 4 glasses of red wine, right?
What does oxidized food mean?
It's mostly fried foods. And foods that have a lot of chemicals in them, like a ho-ho. That would be an oxidized food. There are still foods, there are still chips out there like Doritos that have like the bad fats in them, the saturated, or not saturated, the trans fats. Trans fats would be another one that is an oxidized food. You know, anything with a lot of chemicals in it, like monosodium glutamate, would be another one that's oxidizing to your tissue because it produces a lot of extra glutamate. So exercise makes a huge difference in reducing your oxidative stress as well. I think it does a couple different things. It brings down your cortisol, especially yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong. All 3 of those are really helpful. I think they also help you take those deeper breaths, right? So you're getting exercise and you're breathing different. Okay, so we'll go on. So any of you that have heard of epigenetics, you probably heard of methylation. Well, what is methylation? I just showed you. Methylation is when you have a carbon with 3 hydrogens. And what you should need to know about this is to methylate something, it takes a lot of ATP to do that. And some people are better at it than others. So we'll go to the next slide. So why do I care about methylation? This is the epigenetics part, right? What does methylation do for us? Well, it really does almost everything. It helps with gene regulation. So it tells your nucleotides, it keeps everything the way it should be rather than mutating, right? So cancer would be, when somebody doesn't methylate very well, they may get cancer, right? If somebody doesn't methylate very well, they may get an autoimmune disease because it's actually in their DNA that their family history has this autoimmune condition, but they make themselves more prone to getting it if they're not methylating well. It processes chemicals, so it detoxifies you. It ultimately makes SAMe and glutathione, which again we heard before, glutathione is the most potent antioxidant in your body. So it does more than that. It builds your neurotransmitters, so your mood is all determined on how well you methylate. So how much norepinephrine, how anxious you are, right? If you get depressed, if you have OCD, if you have bipolar-like symptoms, a lot of times it's a methylation issue. And I was listening to a lecture yesterday where somebody said if you take all institutionalized people and all you did is give them methylfolate, he was claiming that at least 30% of all people that are institutionalized would be able to walk out and leave. That's how big of a difference it can make, because of the way that folinic acid can impact your whole methylation cycle. It also, how we break down those neurotransmitters, right? So the people that are constantly hyper anxious or on the go, you know those people that can never sit? That's usually a methylation issue. It can be their food. Of course, food is the first thing that we change, right? And after all of the foods, like you're giving them the best diet possible, then you have to look for what else could be causing them to be more revved up. How they process their hormones, right? So there's a SNP, this is when the gene has a change in it from the rest of the population, or what it should have. And there's lots of different SNPs. I'll show you a graph, which hopefully you won't like get up and leave because it's a little overwhelming to look at. But it shows all the different kinds of SNPs you can have, and one of them is the COMT, and that's how you process estrogen. So it can make a huge difference in your breast tissue staying healthy, again, preventing you from getting cancer, preventing you from getting ovarian cancer, and also making sure that you don't have as many hot flashes as you go through menopause. There's all different kinds of applications of how it breaks down and processes your estrogen. It determines your immune, how you build your immune cells, so your white blood cells, your red blood cells. It makes your DNA synthesis, how you build your own DNA and how you replicate it. Energy production about those mitochondria that we just talked about. The protective coating or the myelination of the nerves. So the problem is in MS. A lot of people with MS have a methylation issue. And building and maintaining cell membranes. So that cell membrane integrity is, we're constantly asking, just like the leaky gut, right? If you have leaky gut, you probably also have leaky cellular debris, which means things can come in and out of that cell, and sometimes you don't want as much magnesium to leave the cell, or you don't want to bring in a lot of mercury into the cell. So you want really good cell integrity. So we'll go to the next one. So this is the way I think, right? When you come to see me, this is going on in my head, right? Along with all of the nutrition that we're talking about, because if you look, it's talking about B12. It's talking about methylfolate, which is over here. It's talking about your glutathione and how you're producing your glutathione, and how you're producing cortisol, and how you're managing cortisol, and how you're managing your neurotransmitters. So these are all the different SNPs that you can have. And SNPs are the variations in those genes that those genes aren't working just right. They're either going too fast or they're going too slow. And it's up to you to change your diet and have a great diet to produce the best genes possible for you and to live as healthy as you can with the genome that you have, right? So when we know, okay, well, you have a SNP in your CBS and you utilize too much homocysteine and then you run out of methylfolate that helps the whole thing go, you may end up with cardiovascular disease, right? Heart disease. Your family might all have a history of stroke or coronary artery disease where they have a massive heart attack. Well, you can actually manage that through nutrition if you know it's coming down the pipeline. If you know what to look for and know what ratios to look for, you can actually tell which direction you're going in, right? So this is a lot. You don't have to understand this at all. I just want you to know, like, there is so much science behind what I'm talking about that there's so many resources for you to help you with all those different, whether it's neurotransmitters and mood, regulation, or whether it's cancer, or whether it's heart disease, or whether it's autoimmune, or whether it's detoxification or a histamine response where you're overproducing too much histamine and your body's reacting and it makes you revved up. So your catecholamines, or your neurotransmitters like epinephrine and norepinephrine and glutamate, are causing you to feel anxious or can't sleep at night. There's a reason. It's not just arbitrary, right? We can see that when we look at this. So, but I don't treat you, and nobody should treat you based on the SNPs that you have or the changes in your genes that you have. They should be looking at, what are you struggling with? And then maybe we run this test and say, oh, well, your nutrition, you speed through these cycles and you need more of these nutrients because of it, right? That are going to support you to be healthier. Is everybody following? That's epigenetics. It's giving you the exact nutrition based on what you need because of your genes and because of what you're presenting with, right? If you feel great, there's no reason to run one of these kind of tests. And so just keep doing what you're doing if you feel amazing, right? Eat those really good foods. But if you get to a point where it's really confusing and you don't understand why you're not getting better, you can get really specific. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is a much simpler, but yet still can be a lot. So just eating, if you eat just meat and potatoes and you're not getting any vegetables in your diet, you're probably going to be deficient in methylfolate, which makes this whole thing go. And your neurotransmitters will be off, and your cholesterol is going to change, and you're going to have more heart disease in the future. So that's what meat and potatoes means up here. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, what happens is your B12 falls. And that gets really dangerous because it causes anemia, and it causes this whole thing to also shut down, so that you can't actually end up making so much glutathione, and you can't make your neurotransmitters very well, and you're putting yourself at risk for all kinds of health issues if you have a B12 deficiency. And if you have a B12 deficiency, you can't, even if you eat a lot of greens, right? Let's say you have green smoothie every day, but you don't have B12, then what happens is you get methyl trapping, and you don't move on. It just all shuts down. So there are things that you need in order for it all to work. And B12 is one of those key pieces. It's a linchpin, right? It's so important. So with a vegetarian diet, you need to take some kind of either hydroxy or methylated B12, or to have it tested, But if it shows high B12, just cobalamin, it's usually not in the cell. You have to actually look in the cell, not in the plasma or the cytoplasm, because that's not telling you what's actually getting into the cell, right? And most people that have high B12 have low cellular B12. So methyl, you have to give an absorbable form of methyl B12. And unfortunately, if you're a vegetarian, there's no food that's really going to give you methyl B12, right? You have to take a vitamin, a supplement for that. Whereas if you're eating a lot of really good proteins and things like that, that's going to give you the B12. You may need more, right? I eat a lot. I don't eat a tremendous amount of meat, but I eat meat in my diet, and my B12 was low. But I get on airplanes all the time, so I'm constantly bombarded by oxidative stress. So I have to take hydroxy B12. So obesity is another one that robs you of nutrients. A lot of people that are obese have a lot of leaky gut and are not getting the proper nutrients in to be absorbed. Athletes, like marathon runners, they're depleting themselves, right? There's such thing as too much exercise. When you've gone too far for too long, you've actually depleted yourself. So that's what it's talking about for athletes. If you're moderate exercise, you're going to be fine, right? It's not a problem. Alcohol and smoking, of course, cause more oxidative stress, which puts a hardship on all of this and your ability to absorb and utilize this pathway. Heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, xenobiotics, all these medications. So it's said that 40 to 60% of us have an MTHFR defect, right? That means it only works at 40%. When you take acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, it shuts it down. It shuts this whole thing down for 2 days. Every time. That's one dose. So I really tell people, if you need to use a pain reliever, if you need to use a fever reducer, use ibuprofen with kids and adults. Don't take acetaminophen. It's so toxic for not only your liver, but it shuts this down. And if you're one of those people that has an MTHFR defect, it's going to put you back days. So, and it's hard to recover. So antacids are another one of those. Antacids shut down your methylfolate cycle. And because it shuts down your acid production, and then you're actually not digesting your food correctly. So unfortunately, antacids are given so frequently to kids now, and it's my little like piece that I would love to go out there and, you know, that would be my one thing, if I could get people to stop giving antacids and get kids, you know, on the right foods that are right for them, the right probiotics. Because usually they'll bounce back really quickly if you get the food sensitivity out and you get probiotics in them. Because when you give them antacids, you're setting them up for nutritional deficiencies for life at the beginning of life. So try to avoid antacids, and if you need more help with that, call me. Nitrous oxide. So this is what you get in the dentist's office. That is really toxic to anyone that has these kind of SNPs. It makes everything shut down, and it can actually cause brain damage in some kids or adults. There are people that have gone in and have never felt right since they got nitrous. So if you know you have the SNP, you actually need to put it in your medical record, and anytime you go to any doctor, you tell them, you can never give me these medications. There's a whole list of medications that affect your methylfolate cycle, and if you have that genetic SNP, no one should ever give you those medicines. You want to check that, because otherwise that's working against you, and it's actually making you more sick in the long run. Prolonged stress is one of the worst, right, to your mitochondria and your methylfolate, because when you're stressed and you're going, you burn up all those nutrients, and then you're deficient again. So a lot of people come to me and they say, that's so much higher than the recommended dosage. I say, well, you burn through that in if you were to take the recommended dosage, you would burn through that in an hour. Through the whole day, you need another 24 times that amount, because it's not enough to sustain your way of dealing with your stress. So yeah, magnesium, B6, we're going to talk about those. But yeah, if you don't sleep, or if you get really stressed out and are anxious all the time, you're burning through those cofactors that help calm you down, right, to produce more. So an example of that would be somebody that doesn't sleep and is anxious, right? Well, the nutrients needed would be magnesium, B6, B12, and you need more GABA, right? You need something to help you feel calmer. Well, you burn through all your GABA, you burn through all your B6, you burn through magnesium, and then you're left, and that makes you more anxious and more revved until you get it to calm down. And our environment is constantly giving you stimulus that produces more glutamate, which makes that proportion of GABA out of whack, and then you feel more and more anxious, right? And then it feeds on itself and you can't sleep. But if you start taking the nutrients, all of a sudden that GABA balance comes back and you can sleep. So sometimes and you crave carbs like so much. You want the stimulants, you want coffee, and you want sugar. Like if you don't sleep and you're stressed all the time, what you want is quick and easy forms of stimulants, right? Which are coffee and sugar, right? I want the pastry and the donut and the cup of coffee, and I'll feel a lot better for like an hour, and then you'll feel awful, and then you'll do it again. So that's a pattern that people get into, but what they really need is to balance their blood sugar, calm them down, give them some magnesium, B6, zinc is another one, and they'll start to actually build back up through CME. And it goes to something called BH4, which produces serotonin to bring you down, and GABA to help you feel calm. So yeah. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. So now I talk about the master regulator of methylation is the MTHFR. So a lot of people just run the MTHFR gene to find out, do I have it or do I not? The C677 variant is the one that is associated with heart disease. And it's got the most research behind it. There's also one called A1266, I think. Those are the two most popularized and most tested SNPs. They're called SNPs, which they're genetic variations. of this piece. And if you go back to the last slide, it's this piece right here. It's how we convert our folate into methylfolate. So if you go back, so what lowers your MTHFR? Antacids, these kind of drugs, oral birth control pills, and metformin, and high-dose niacin. If somebody's got high cholesterol, they take high-dose niacin and they think it's really good, but they're just trashing their methylfolate and they end up with thyroid problems. So you don't want to just take a bunch of niacin, even though it's a nutrient, right? Alcohol does it, but this is the big one, which we just talked about, psychological stress. You'll use up all your methylfolate, right? I'm using a bunch of it up right now because I'm up here talking, right? I'm a little revved up. So stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, can't do it, a pessimist, even an optimist, like people that are over-optimistic and then they're disappointed all the time because they didn't get what they really wanted. So you want to manage that because your cortisol, it depletes these cofactors, which are magnesium, zinc, MTHFR, methyl B12, active B6, B2, choline. You need all of these. And if, like I said, you don't have to take a bunch of supplements. You can eat a lot of really great leafy greens, watercress, broccoli sprouts. You can eat your kale sometimes and cook it, if you can. And all those root vegetables, those are wonderful too for different reasons. And then a really good protein, that's going to be the basis of your nutrition, but this gets really dialed in. If you have some kind of issue in your health, and then we run the testing to know which of these SNPs you have and why you're running through certain nutrients and deficient in certain nutrients, then we can give you those exact nutrients, and then you're going to feel so much better because we know exactly what you need. You can go to the next one. So these are the different ways you can test it. If you were to ask me, the cheapest and the easiest way to do this is called 23andMe. And in the 23andMe, you get all the raw data of your genes, and you take it to something called Genetic Genie, and it spits out a methylation and a detoxification report. And there's so much we can do with both of those reports. And that test is only $99. And if you're going to do the 23andMe, which I think is it's the most cost-effective of any of this, because if you go to LabCorp, all they'll do is the MTHFR, and it's $150, and you get one gene, just the MTHFR. Or if you go to Quest, same thing. It's a $10,000 test, that 23andMe, but they're giving it to you for $100. Now, if you're going to do it, I would do it anonymous, because they have your genetic information. You just may want to be anonymous, right? I'm just saying you can do it that way, because the person that owns 23andMe also, they're married to the person that owns Google.
Huh.
So anyway, they're offering it for $99. I'm not a conspiracy theory person, and I don't, I'm not like it's 1984 or any of that stuff, that book. But I do believe that this test gives you the most information, but you should do it anonymously. You shouldn't give somebody else all your genetics and tell them who you are.
And how do you do it?
It's a saliva test. They send you a kit, you spit, all you have to do is spit into a little tube, and you send it away, and they give you all your genes.
So if you do it anonymously, they must give you a key or code or something, and then you...
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't done this. When I did mine and my son's, we did it through Doctor's Data, and we paid $600 because they had shut down 23andMe at that point. But then it's up and running again. I will tell you that on their website it says that it'll only give you ancestral data and raw data, which it's fine. You take that raw data, you plug it into Genetic Genie, and it spits out the report for you. And the Genetic Genie you can do anonymously too. You just have to remember what you call yourself. And when you send it to my office, you have to tell me who you are. Right? Or whoever you have interpret your genes. So if you go to the next one. So this is from nourishingmeals.com. This is people fermenting. This is carrots, that's cauliflower and pepper and onions. Those are garlic and some green beans, and these are pickles, and I don't know what that one is. But anyway, it's simple and easy to do this yourself. You don't have to pay, because if you go to Whole Foods and buy fermented foods, it's so expensive. You can do it at home, and you won't hurt yourself. You're not going to get botulinum, okay? But if you go to nourishingmeals.com, there's all kinds of great recipes for that. And then you get the beneficial probiotics and all of it. You're getting the raw enzymes of all these foods too, so you're getting the bioavailability of these foods in their raw form. So you can go to the next one. So this just gives you some ideas about different meals. This is a broth, and they put shiitake mushrooms in there. They put some noodles. They put some watercress on the top, which is a little bit spicy. If you don't want it if you don't like watercress, you can add one of the other greens like spinach or a little bit of, well, if you want it bitter, you could put more dandelions or something, dandelion greens or something like that. There's some onion and carrot and different things in there, but the base is chicken broth. This one is Brussels sprouts with cranberries and almonds and a little bit of onions and garlic. So how this one is made is that you just, I put the Brussels sprouts on the stove and I blanch them, or I boil them for a little bit. Then I pour off the water, I put them in a cast iron skillet, and I put a little bit of butter in there. I do use butter, and if you don't use butter, you could use something like coconut oil. It would just make it a little bit sweeter. And I put onions and garlic in, and sometimes my son will talk me into putting pancetta, because that's really good. It's a little salty, but anyway, you can put that in there, and then you can finish it with cranberries and almonds. And this is that's kale. So those are some ideas. So I just wanted to briefly touch. So these are all wonderful things to eat, right? They're wonderful fruits and vegetables, but you should know that there's a line going like this, which means all of these foods are the healthiest for detoxification and making that methylfolate cycle run really well. Broccoli, watercress, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, arugula, kale, kohlrabi, daikon, red radish, horseradish, Chinese cabbage, and bok choy. So of all the options, if you can kind of lean a little bit heavier towards these, and there are ways to make them more palatable, roasting them, sometimes kids like a little bit better. But anyway, these are going to help your liver detoxify much more efficiently, and they're going to help you have the results that you're looking for just in your diet without taking a bunch of supplements to make those metabolic pathways run better. So these are the second, right? These are the second to these. So these are good too. I mean, to my son's dismay, I put onions and garlic in almost everything we cook. He's like trying to pick out the onions. But anyway, yeah, it's a great place to start if you can get, sometimes hiding, like I know that some kids don't like this, but you can take and there's one family of mine in Boulder that cuts up kale and puts it in the hamburger so that their child will eat, because otherwise they wouldn't eat kale just by itself, right? So they're also more bitter, these are more bitter. They have more to offer. They're also really good for digestion. They help you break down your food and digest your food better. And bile production is better, which means you're breaking down your fats better. So that's why this side is, we want to lean heavier on this side. Okay, the next one. So this is my chicken broth. I take an organic whole chicken with garlic and salt and pepper, and I put it in a clay pot because I like it to be really moist. And I cook it it's at 475 for like an hour in a clay pot that's been soaking in water for like 15 minutes. And then I take that out, I let it cool off, I tear off all the meat, and then I put everything else, all the skin, all the bones, they actually say to add chicken feet to get more of the cartilage into the bone broth. So you're gonna notice that on the GAPS diet, and if you read about bone broths, they talk about chicken's feet a lot. I don't put that in mine, but you could try it in yours if you wanted a little bit more gelatinous. Then I place all of it in a slow cooker I add a lot of I add water after I add 2 onions, and I add them with the skin of the onion because that has a lot of nutrients in it. You don't want to peel the skin off of your onions to make your broth. Or your garlic. I put the garlic, my son watches me, he's like, Mom, are you going to take all that gross stuff off? No, we're going to throw it all in. It's got so much of the nutrients in it. So I put the skin of the onions and the cloves of garlic all into the slow cooker. I put 2 stalks of celery, 3 carrots, 2 tablespoons of parsley. You can put turmeric in there. It's a strong anti-inflammatory. Some people like the flavor, some people don't. You can leave that out if you don't like the taste of turmeric. A half a teaspoon of pepper if you need it. You know, you don't always have to put the pepper in either. You cook it for 24 hours with, you know, you add water, and then you cook it for 24 hours. And then after it's all, you know, I pour off all of the bones and all of the vegetables, and I just have the broth, and then I add all of these. I add the chicken, the gluten-free noodles, the shiitake mushrooms, onion, carrot, parsnips, parsley, celery, garlic, salt, and pepper.
And that's your meal?
I'm sorry?
That's your meal?
That's a meal. It's a really hearty, really healthy meal. And it's so beneficial for not only your GI system, but it impacts your natural killer cells. So you're really more, you can fight. So if something comes, like let's say somebody comes over to your house and they have the flu and they didn't know it until the next day, your body got a healthy dose of that flu. But if you were eating these kind of foods on a regular basis, you have the innate immunity, which is your natural killer cells, your macrophages, that would fight off that infection and you wouldn't get sick.
Do you have handouts of this, or should we just?
Diane has a handout of this too. But you can do this also with beef bones. You can buy organic grass-fed beef or bison bones at Whole Foods or probably Mrs. Green's, or you can find them online. And you can make these broths that way too, with beef bones or lamb bones. They're all good. I mean, chicken is just the easiest, and a lot of kids will eat chicken noodle soup. And so a lot of kids that would never eat gluten-free will eat this because they can't tell that it's gluten-free noodles because of the kind of noodles I use in it. The vegetables are really pretty fresh when I serve it too, so it's totally different than if you slap out a can of chicken noodle soup, right? So I don't know, especially if you put in the parsnips because it makes it sweet and you get all the antioxidants. So another big piece of my 101 is you want to diversify your diet. Parsnips are not something we have all the time, right? But if you put them in things, they taste the sweetness, right? And it gives an alternative to a carrot. Right? So these are some resources and some references for you. If you go to my website under naturopathic medicine, I have a new website, but I'm not completely satisfied with it yet. You're going to see it change over time. But if you go to the navigation system and you go to resources, and then you go under naturopathic medicine, you're going to find there's diets and nutrition. There's so much information in there that's buried, but if you go and find it, it's there for you. So there's so much that you could find on my website. You could, just mess around on there. But if you have any questions, let me know. You can go to the next one. So this is my contact information. I'm sorry, I couldn't get my logo on here because I didn't have a copy of it in my computer. Yeah, I have so much information about nutrition. I was just going to open it up to questions now because you can tell me a condition and we can talk about nutrition. You can come and see me. Well, you can't see me in Connecticut, but you can see me in Colorado, or you can have a phone consultation on the phone and we can talk too. But there's a lot that can be healed just by changing your diet. And there are things that are working for you and against you based on what your nutritional or what your genes look like and what your body is experiencing. So, is there any questions?